Here's a trigger warning ahead of today's video. For today's discussion will include sexual assault. Viewer discretion advised. Tell me if you've heard of this film before. Two criminal brothers, one calm and one a wild card, in the middle of their latest scheme, are unexpectedly attacked by vampires, and with a ragtag crew, had to survive a night of carnage in an enclosed location. If you guessed Ryan Coogler's Sinners starring Michael B. Jordan, you're correct. But if you also guessed From Dusk Till Dawn starring George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino, you are also correct.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
Hi, welcome to Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell. Today we'll be talking about Sinners and From Dusk Till Dawn, and how I think that Sinners has taken what From Dusk Till Dawn has done and has elevated it into a way better film. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I am almost at my mid-year goal of 350 subscribers. Any help that you guys could give to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. We'll start with From Dusk Till Dawn. Before Quentin Tarantino became a director, he was writing scripts. And Dawn was the first writing gig that Quentin Tarantino ever got. The point of From Dusk Till Dawn was that it was meant to be essentially a demo reel for effects company K&B. Basically make a giant splatterfest that could be like, wow, I want to go with K&B for my next movie. And honestly, what a better way to do that than by having like a movie where you're just fighting a bunch of Aztec vampires. Dawn introduced one of the most famous recent twists in horror history by taking a standard crime thriller movie and then spinning it on its head by interjecting vampires into the midpoint. And even scarier than that, introducing the world to Quentin Tarantino's foot fetish. This is clearly where it started. Inspired by exploitation films that Tarantino and director Robert Rodriguez have enjoyed, Dawn is an insanely gory, violent, crude splatterfest. Like, it's really a fun time, where, interestingly enough, in a world that you find out by the midpoint is full of vampires, the scariest thing in the movie, it's not even the vampires. It's basically any scene in the first half of the movie with Quentin Tarantino's character, Richard Gecko, who is a deranged sex offender and murderer. Like, anytime he is alone with a woman in this movie, it's terrifying in a real-world sense. Even though I enjoy this movie, it did make me uncomfortable. Dawn itself, it doesn't have too much to say. It's really, at the end of the day, just a giant splatterfest where you get George Clooney, Harvey Keitel, a ragtag group of people to just like fight a bunch of vampires. You can have dumb fun with really no messages in there. But I don't know if this is intentional or not. If you do look beyond the carnage of From Dusk Till Dawn, there is, I think, a slight commentary on the male gaze. You've noticed within the first half of the movie, Richard Gecko's perversions, it just literally makes every situation way, way worse. He ends up killing their first hostage. He's eyeing up the daughter of Harvey Keitel. He's just making this plain heist go incredibly wrong at every step of the way. And it's taken to the extreme in the second half of the movie at the home of the male gaze, only for Richard to finally get what he deserves at the fangs of Santanico Pandemonium, played by Selma Hayek. You're not really meant to think about it, but I do have a feeling that it is a very subtle message deep within there that some people pass off because they just think it's a fun, sleazy movie. But I can understand why a modern audience might potentially be turned off by From Dusk Till Dawn today. Even though in the film they do condone the actions of Richard Gecko, ultimately though, those scenes, they can still be very uncomfortable. I remember my fiance, I tried showing her the movie for the first time ever, me included, because I knew about the vampire twist and I figured it'd be fun to watch. It took a lot to get us to that midpoint because she just was not having a good time watching it. Even though there is some good dialogue in there, the first half can be very uncomfortable because you are following these two hardcore criminals where one of them is a sex offender. Fast forward almost 30 years later, in a world that's even more oversaturated with vampires, Ryan Coogler takes another stab, no pun intended, at the formula that From Dusk Till Dawn has made with his movie Sinners. And what I like about Sinners is that there is plenty of suspense and really awesome vampire gore. But Coogler, he is very purposeful with the elements in his movie. Coogler not only uses the race of his cast and the setting of 1930s Jim Crow Mississippi, but even the vampires' nationality to tell a fully realized story. If you take a look at the main cast, it is divided into a few groups of people who were persecuted in early America. You have 6 African Americans, a Chinese husband and wife, a mixed person, and even the villain is an Irish immigrant vampire. Each of these characters, including the villain, want to find their own definition of freedom within this time period, whether to have money and or liquor or, other vices like that, to being with the ones that they love, to following their dreams. These characters, they yearn for something better than the cards that they were dealt with from a flawed society. And while I like the simplicity of Dawn's characters and their stories, I really think that giving this story a more grounded approach, but also like giving more depth to these characters and using real world history to kind of guide like where these characters are and their mindset and their experiences, I think it does create a more enriching movie. But it still keeps the same vampire fun that you would expect from a movie like this. The difference here is that by implementing those elements into this plain like B-plot movie, you make the stakes feel more dire. The only downside to such a broadcast, in my opinion, is that pretty much because you have a bunch of different characters and you kind of want to see how a lot of their stories play out, you do get a bunch of endings. You do get 3 endings back to back to back from director Ryan Coogler. One of these endings, it plays out during a mid-credits scene. Like at first I thought it was just like a normal mid-credits scene that kind of sets up like a playful little stinger where I know it probably wasn't going to go anywhere, but I was thinking, oh shoot. But then it goes on for like another 10-minute scene, which is where Dawn gets a slight advantage over Sinners, is that as soon as the vampire carnage is done and evil is vanquished, and all that fun stuff, the movie, it wraps up pretty quickly, it wraps up, it's done. And I like every scene that Coogler included with his ending of the movie. Just how long it kind of stretched towards the end, it kind of ruined the momentum that we just got off of, and it really felt like I was watching a director's cut. But still, despite that though, I had a good time watching it. If there's one thing that we need to talk about with this movie, it's the music. Music is used pretty standardly in Dawn, in that it's pretty much just used for the soundtrack, and really the only time that it is super effective is whenever the live band it's playing music diegetically while Santanico is dancing on stage. It conveys almost a hypnotic sound to go along with their dancing, and it really reminds me, at least a lot, of a siren singing to sailors, and the sailors going over to the sirens to face their doom. But Sinner's utilization of blues music, it almost honestly makes this like a musical. And I mean that in the best way possible. It not only captures the historical aspect of the time, but it even ties into the personal histories of these characters. But at the same time, if you want to look at it from a surface level, this music also sets itself apart from not only Dusk Till Dawn, but other horror films in general. There aren't a whole lot of horror movies that utilize the blues, and it's really catchy, but it also creates the sense of underlying dread. And music itself, it's a main conflict for the movie. That's what draws the vampires over to them in the first place. What I'm sure, if you've been online, you've seen people describe it as the scene. And I agree, it is the scene. In this beautiful one shot where you see the history of this music that's being played in this moment tonight, all the sounds that led up to this music, and ultimately what this music being played right now will ultimately lead to. It's done in this beautiful one take. At first it feels like it comes out of nowhere, but without really saying too much, you understand what is significant about this music. And yet when you combine the conflict of this movie, which is ultimately the vampires are not only looking for a meal, but to grow their army. Yet you have the main characters who don't want their personality, their lives, their history to just be absorbed into the mindless horde. It's that desperation of holding on to your identity And so to wrap this up, even though these two movies, they are essentially the same, they both sought to do very, very, very different things, and I think they both succeeded at them. And I definitely recommend both of these movies for very different reasons. Like, whenever Sinners does come out on digital or physical, I don't know if it would be a good double feature with From Dusk Till Dawn, even though they share similar things. But without Dawn, you know, we wouldn't have gotten Sinners. But Sinners, it does show that we can take an older premise too, and we could give it some fresh new life and personality. As Ryan Coogler stated, a full meal of a cinematic experience just by adding in a different perspective. And so I would give Sinners, I'd say I'd give it like an 8.5 to a 9 out of 10. I think if the ending were tighter, it would have been even better. And of course, From Dusk Till Dawn, that one is still a lot of fun, me revisiting it years later. I would give that about a 6.5 out of 10. So have you seen the new movie Sinners? Have you even seen From Dusk Till Dawn? Comment below, let me know. And as always, thank you so much for watching this to the very end. My name is Douglas Campbell, and if you excuse me, I gotta add to the stash.